So Patti, really enjoyed our interview today with Josh Holden. I love whenever we get somebody on the Merchant Sales Podcast who actually sells merchant services. That's always fun.
And it's also whenever they're so excited,
Yeah, you can feel the passion in
you
it.
can feel the passion in the conversation. I think anybody who's listening is going to come away saying, hey, there's some great ideas that I need to be taking into consideration here.
Yeah, and really, whether you sell Clover or not, they're
Right.
just really good stuff, and just kind of how to sell point of sale in general, and of course a lot of Clover specific stuff as well.
Right.
I followed it up talking about this kind of disconnect that exists. I've talked about it several times before, but there's this disconnect that exists where companies in our industry will spend a lot of money to buy a portfolio or buy a book of business, but they don't seem to be quite as savvy in terms of deploying their capital to buy new accounts through the agent channel. And so I talk about what you can do as a processing company, but also as an individual agent, what you can do to get access to the kind of capital that you need in order to do the types of things that Josh talks about in the interview today. And then Patti, I thought yours today was your insider's report was interesting as well.
Yeah, I talk about fraud and about how, fraudsters are getting bigger paydays, and a lot of the technologies that are aiding and assisting us and our clients are also assisting them. And
Yeah.
a little spoiler alert, there's a new phrase out there, fraud as a service.
Yeah, there you go. I wonder if that's going to catch on, was that going to be FAS, right? Like FAS,
right? Yeah,
right?
FAS. So this episode, of course, is brought to you by ISOAMP. You can go to the web and check it out at getisoamp.com. So what do you say we get going, James?
Let's do it. All right, everybody. Patti and I are here today with Josh Holden. Josh is the owner at HTB Business Solutions. How are you doing today, Josh?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Josh and I connected recently. And while Josh has quite the business operation and really is building out his own brand and ISO and among other things, payroll and all this other stuff, he is still actively out in the field and training agents and all of that. And so I thought, let's actually have a conversation with somebody who's selling merchant services on the Merchant Sales Podcast. That would be cool. And specifically, we want to focus on Clover. I know that's an area of expertise for you, Josh. So before we dive into all that, though, give us your story. How did you get into this crazy industry, and how did you end up doing what you're doing now?
So brief background, I've been in the credit card processing industry for 14 years now. I started off at Wells Fargo. I worked there for about 6 years. It was a great place to cut my teeth because I got to see statements like on a daily. Like I got to see a lot of merchant statements, really understand how interchange works, how like other companies price. So it gave me a lot of like background as far as how merchant service works. From there, I went over to First Data Merchant Services directly. I was in their mid-market division, so I covered all of California for their Citibank relationship. And then from there, I went and became a regional manager for Heartland Merchant Services, and I did that for a year. And after about those three different companies that I worked for, I don't want to say I didn't like the way that they did credit card processing, but I wanted to do something different.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of the companies out there, they pay off of revenue. And I know that's big for the credit card processing world. All agents want, oh, how do I get my reoccurring revenue? But what happens is I feel like customers sometimes get left out. So I was like, I'm going to start something different. And it's going to be customer service, customer base. Pricing is going to be something that we're going to go in there and we're going to offer low rates. So I found Card Connect. And one of the biggest advantages for me in Card Connect, it started off with Ignite. So anybody who knows Ignite, that's where we got it. And then First Data bought Card Connect and we became agents for them. Is we don't have a buy rate. So when I walk into a client's place, I can offer the same rates as Costco's getting or anybody else in the world is getting. And it gave me a lot of like power when I walk into a place, and I want to be able to offer customer service and offer the lowest rates. So it kind of fits what our focus is and what we're trying to offer to clients.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I hadn't thought of it till now, but I actually had dinner with the two people who kind of came up with that idea a long time ago. And I was like, you're nuts. We were talking about it for a little while because it's like literally your Schedule A was like 0 and 0.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing? And then they started talking about the power of it. And, I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. So yeah, that was a big deal with Ignite and then, the First Data and all that. So yeah, pretty cool. Okay. So yeah, that's interesting. We may circle back to that later actually, but let's transition to Clover for a second. So when we talk about Clover, obviously there are like many, many, many different solutions out there now on the point of sale side, like maybe too many, I'm not sure. Why Clover? What was the rationale for going with Clover as kind of a big focus?
When we first started, It's because they were First Data. Like that's what I knew. Like
Right, right.
I worked at Wells Fargo. I worked for First Data, which is Pfizer now. I don't know if I should keep saying First Data, but I knew the product. So it was very easy for me to go in there and sell it. Card Connect, obviously, that's their main go-to as far as POS systems go. So I knew the product and I felt very comfortable with it. I would tell you over the last probably 2 to 3 years since COVID, Clover's First Data or Pfizer spent a lot of money on Clover. It's become their baby. So I feel strongly about it now. And when we walk into a place, whether it's a restaurant or a retail store, I feel like we can do anything that they need to be done for their business and how to operate it and run it. So I feel very confident about it. Is that the only thing we go in there and talk about? No, I don't care what they really use. I just want to do the credit card processing typically. So if they have micros, if they're using Lavu, if they're using, like, I know we can integrate with these ones. So we just try to go down the path of least resistance.
Sure. Understood. Yeah. And I think, you know, one of the cool things about Clover, I was thinking about this before the podcast. It's like, if you asked me and said, you know, if you see somebody with an iPhone or a MacBook, you know that that's an Apple product.
Yes.
Like, you know it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you asked me and said, what are the point of sale systems that have that kind of brand recognition among small business owners? There's only two that I could think of.
Right.
Yeah.
One is Square, which ISOs can't sell.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is Clover. And they have this really unique kind of dimensions of the station and whatever, right? And I mean, maybe the Clover Flex is a little bit, maybe not as well known, but as far as the Clover Mini and the Clover Station, they've got their brand recognition. I'm just curious about that. Did that figure into kind of your push for that? Does that figure into the sales process at all? Like, what's the power of that in your kind of decision making?
It's funny because it's like a double-edged sword, right? When I go into a small place, like if I go into a retail store who's using a side terminal, when you mentioned Clover Mini, they're like, oh my gosh, I see that everywhere. We love that. Right. When you go into a bigger restaurant, they're like, Clover, isn't that more for retail or more for, you know, quick service? So you have to overcome that objection of like, no, it can do anything that you need it to do. So it's hit or miss kind of thing. But obviously the brand name is big for us. When we walk in, people know what it is. So, and it looks good, right? I think it looks smooth on the
sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. So that helps.
So if you don't mind, Josh, can you give us a couple examples, you know, of some of the business types that, you know, are a really good fit for Clover? And maybe, you know, what Clover hardware and apps are at the core of that?
So you may not like this answer because I'm going to say everything.
I like every answer.
Clover's good for everything. I mean, we have the biggest knock on Clover for a while was it wasn't great for your traditional sit down restaurant.
Right.
Like that, like I'll tell you, that's that's my biggest objection when I walk into a place is, oh, it doesn't do this. And I think it has a lot to do with the people selling it. I hate to say that. I mean, when I worked at Wells Fargo, when it first came out, it was a plug and play solution. Like you sent them the box, the customer set it up. They got on the phone with Clover. There wasn't much customer service as far as someone who did installations going out there and setting it up. So what I did was I was like, I'm going to have an installation team. I'm going to have a guy who knows Clover inside and out working for me so that when we walk into a place, we have every single answer ready for them. So we do focus a lot on larger businesses. So your restaurants are going to do a lot more volume than some of your quick service. So we do a lot of restaurants, sit down dining. You know, I have a client who does $3 million a month in credit card processing on a restaurant. So when someone tells me, oh, it doesn't do big restaurants, I'm like, I don't know a lot of restaurants doing that kind of volume a month, and seeing that many clients a month. So it does do everything. Now you can take it all the way down to the food truck, right? I mean, you have your minis, you have your handhelds, the Clover Flex. Yeah. That can do food trucks. You obviously can do retail on it too. And you can use it as something as basic as a side terminal. I love the fact that it's very diverse and the fact that they have different software plans depending on what type of industry you're in or what type of business you have. So it's very flexible in those situations.
Just out of curiosity, it's a little off topic, I guess, but like, you know, when you think about the cost of Clover, one of the other objections that I've heard people talk about over the years and that I've had a few times myself is like, you know, you have other systems that have this kind of all-in cost. You know what I mean? Whereas Clover, it's like, well, I want these 3 apps and I want this, you know, the next thing I know, I'm spending $200 a month or whatever on software. What's your approach to that in the maybe in the sales process? Is it kind of a, hey, you're going to spend this money anyway, but we're going to integrate everything together? Or what are your thoughts on that? Kind of the cost versus competitors?
Again, it's case by case. I mean, it really is case by case. I've noticed that other companies do the same. Like, I mean, James, one of the biggest things I love about your show is you do go after toast, and
Yeah,
like they
Yeah,
do
that's
the
fine.
same.
We like
Yeah.
to eat too.
Yeah.
Wow, that was good. Patti.
They do the same, like Toast does the
Yes,
same thing.
they
Like
do.
if you've ever
Yep.
gone through one of their statements, and the thing is they have a separate statement for apps than they do for their merchant processing. So a lot of
Right.
reps, I don't think, see that. You know,
Right.
they just go for the merchant statement, and their statements are brought out the exact same way.
Right.
Now, I always explain it like it's a cell phone, right? Like you can get the cell phone and it will do 90% of what you want it to do, except for if there's certain specific items you are looking for,
Yeah.
you may have to pay a little bit of cost for that. And clients are okay with that. I don't really get much pushback when it comes to, well, that app costs how much, or that app costs how much. I don't really get a lot of pushback because it solves problems for them.
Right.
I think that's the biggest thing. If you show the value and you can solve an issue or a problem for them, they're more willing to pay for it.
I like that. That's a really good, the phone. That's a good one. I hadn't heard that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, because
Yeah, I like that. Okay. All right. So let's shift gears a little bit. We talked Clover. let's talk sales. So
Yes, I love it.
all right. So you get out in the field, you're walking in again, assuming you're going to kind of be looking at selling Clover primarily. Any tips you have on the prospecting? Maybe it relates to Clover, maybe it doesn't, but like, how do you start this conversation and get in contact with the right person?
So, I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners are do door to door. So we're knocking on doors. Like it's all day. That's the job, right? We have a running joke in our company. Like we're trying to get like 30 no's a day. Like we want to go out there and knock on business owners' doors. So we've, over my period of time of doing that, I've come up with a little bit of a strategy. So our initial time we walk into a client's place, we look for 4 things. First thing is we want to know what kind of equipment they're using. So that all my reps know, you got to identify what they're using. Second thing is we want to know what the business owner's name is. If they're not in that time, we got to get their name. We got to get what days they're usually in. So even if you have to like question people, like some people go, oh, he's never in, or they come in every once in a while, they've learned to say, hey, let's just say you did know when they come in. What days do they come in? Or, some try to overcome that objection. And the fifth one is if you can figure out who they're processing with. We want to get those 5 things. And on the initial time, that's what we do. And then we get a follow-up. Hey, is it okay if we come back in 2 weeks? Is it okay if we come back in 3 weeks? We always end every time we walk into a place with, is it okay if I come back in X amount of time? Because that next initial time is when we use all that information we've gathered to get more specific about their credit card processing. Like if it was you, James, I'd walk in and go, hey, James, I don't know if you remember me, but my name's Josh. I came in a couple of weeks ago. Remember you're using Aloha POS system with WorldPay. You said I could come in and have a conversation with you. Is this a good time to do it? Right then, I feel like we get a lot more yeses because I feel like owners feel obligated if they told me to come back.
Right.
So we use that a lot. And when we first started, I found my reps were getting stuck in, I call it the initial stage or the first stage. Like you kept going back asking, is the owner in? Is the owner in? Follow. And they don't get to those next stages of the sales process.
Right.
So this was a way to get past that. So we go in there and then we'll have a conversation based off of like the information that we get from them.
One of the really interesting, one of the interesting things I wanted to add to that is a lot of the, salesers that have been around for a while in this industry, selling standalone terminals, one thing they really struggle with is they're really good at either a one-call close or kind of a very quick, sales process. And what they don't seem to understand is a lot of them, they struggle to sell technology solutions and integrated payments, not because they wouldn't be able to sell it, but because they don't position themselves to sell it. Yeah. When you're when you're going to have a conversation with a merchant, if you position yourself to have a 4-minute conversation, you're not going to sell Clover. You're not going to sell point of sale, right? You have, and I like what you're saying, because it kind of sounds to me like what you're saying is, even if the owner is there, you know what I mean? You're probably going to recommend a follow-up. You might say something like, I would imagine you're saying something like, we probably need X amount of time to have a conversation.
Yes.
Is now a good time, or would you rather I follow up in 2 weeks? Right. But it's like, if they have that time now, great. But if not, it'd be better to come back when you have a little more leverage. And like, you told me to come back, and now they're a
Yes.
little more obligated to have a 15-minute conversation with you, which is what you
Absolutely.
need to have like an initial, right? Do you agree with that, or anything
Yeah.
you'd add to
And
that?
you're also wouldn't you say you're also in the position because you have more information, right?
Yes.
Information is
Yeah,
power, as
true.
they say, but it allows you to come back and have a more focused conversation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, things that I would say is we try to make it a game. So every step of the sales process is a close or a sale for us. Like, did we get the appointment? Okay, cool. We got that. That deal's closed. Did we get like a final sit down appointment? Did we get a chance to present an application to someone?
Yeah.
Did we get a chance to do a demo? Like, all those are steps that we are trying to close on the way to the final endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing that I would do, that I would recommend to any rep out there, is get a resume going. It's one thing that I've found works extremely well for us. Is we get a list of all our clients, we put them on a piece of paper, we ask them ahead of time, like, hey, is it okay if anybody reaches out to you about our product? Like, I need you guys to, if you believe that we've had good service, would you say good things if another company called you? And when we walk into a place, we hand them a resume. Hey, this is who we are. Here's all the people that we work with that you guys know. And it builds that trust. I always tell reps, if I ever talk to anybody, like, the biggest objection we get is trust.
Yeah.
If you're really presenting good pricing, you're really presenting a good product that you believe in, the only reason they don't sign up is because they don't trust you.
Right.
So we try to get past that barrier by doing things like, we just started an Instagram. All my team has Instagram. We do videos with our clients. Like, hey, this is a new client that signed up with us, just so that they, like, other people around can see, I know that person. Okay, if they're willing to go with you, I'm willing to try to go with you. So we spend a lot of time trying to break down those kind of barriers.
So Josh, that's awesome. So once you actually get in contact, you mentioned this a little bit of kind of this kind of, game that you go down of like the stages, which I love. Talk about the stage of the demo, right? Like,
Okay.
do you do a demo? Do you not do a demo? When do you do a demo? Talk about the strategy there.
Demos typically are only for like big restaurants.
Okay.
That's when we really do demos, is because we have to break that kind of initial thought process of like, Clover doesn't fit big restaurants. So we'll spend time going over the dining app. We'll spend time going over how to split, like, all the basic stuff
Right.
that
Sure.
it can do. Like, we'll spend time doing that. We'll get more specific. What are you looking for? Like, Clover has a ton of apps.
Right.
Like, the nice thing about it is Android based. People make apps and then put them into the Clover market, and it's fits a need that a restaurant owner has.
Right.
So we'll get really specific of, what do you need it to do? What are you looking for it to do? Clover in general has a lot of, I want to say, security like things that they do to make sure that, like, clients can still perform their business. Like, they have built-in cell phone signals. If your internet goes out, you can still operate. It has fingerprint. I think the fingerprint scan, owners love that.
Yeah.
Most owners go, oh, people like, my employees steal my PIN code. Or, I mean, obviously some of them have cards too. You can do cards, but this does fingerprint. They can't steal your fingerprint. So things like that, I think clients like. They also have battery backup in them. So they'll come with like a 6-hour battery. So say world ends, and your internet's out, your power's out, and you have a full restaurant. I don't know too many solutions that will still let you operate your business and take credit cards. It's not offline. You don't have to hope and pray that credit cards go through, any of that stuff. It will still operate fully functional without, having internet or power.
And when you say you tell them about this, so, okay, so big restaurant, we do a demo. Let's say you're not going to do it like an actual live demo. How do you present it? I mean, do you have like any kind of materials or something? Or
Like
you
a
just
flip
tell
book
them,
or something?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, what do you have?
Not too much. We use the internet a lot. We'll pull up stuff on our phones and things. We don't really have too much of a flip book that we use for it, just because everybody knows what it looks like and everybody kind of seen it. Like, I don't have to, I'm never in a situation where I have to go into what is Clover. Like, they know pretty much what it is. And I think that goes back to, what you were talking about earlier. Like, it's got a good brand reputation. Like, people know when you say the word, they know what it looks like. They have a visual in their mind. So we really don't have to do a whole lot of that.
Yeah. And I see that. I mean, it is so popular, particularly in the restaurant arena. I know that's where I first time I ever saw one. I was in a little tiny bodega someplace, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is cool. Then I had to go back and do my research, but it was like,
Mhm.
yeah. But you talked about apps, and
Yeah.
it seems there's so many apps in the marketplace. How do you zero in on what's the right solution for a particular merchant, or do you rely on them to know what's the best?
I definitely don't rely on them to know what's best because
Okay.
they don't know what
you
they don't
they
know.
do have a propensity to go on and look at apps, right?
Yes. I know they don't know what they don't know. So it's a lot of in the needs assessment when we figure out what they're looking for and things that they want it to do.
Right.
We figure out and then we kind of hone in on what kind of apps we would recommend.
Okay.
My team does a lot of research on apps, so we'll figure out what do you want to like. We'll ask them questions like, "Hey, what do you need this to do for you to feel comfortable?" And they'll tell us. I'm like, "All right, if I don't know the answer right off the top of my head, then we have an installation team where I'm like, I need someone to figure out how to get this done."
Right.
So we do that. It comes with most of the stuff you need it to do. The only time we really have to go to the app market is if it's like a big, extensive restaurant and they have all these different things that they want. Yeah, we'll have to
online
dive in.
ordering or that
Well,
kind of
that
stuff,
comes
right?
with it. I love that. Like Clover
Really, online
does
ordering does now. I didn't know that.
online ordering, QR codes, pay at the table,
Yeah,
all that's included. You don't pay extra for any of that kind of stuff.
that's pretty cool. Actually.
Yeah. So it does come with most of it. It comes with a time tracker in there. Homebase is their big app that they use, and it's free for the basic part of it, which I think people love. If you want more HR services, text schedules out, things like that, they have different tiers for you, but it comes with most of the stuff you need. It's more if you need specific detailed information that we have to go and look at a third-party app.
That's very cool. Okay, so last step in this kind of flow, I guess, would be the installation.
Yes.
Right. So you kind of talked about this and touched on it earlier, but you mentioned you have somebody that does the installation. Two things I'm curious about. Number one is, how does that work? Are you glad that you went that direction versus kind of depending more on Clover? Is there still kind of a little bit of a back and forth? I would imagine you still need some things from Clover. So I'm curious about how you kind of structured that. And then the other thing would be what kind of time frame? I mean, this person who's actually pretty good at it. I mean, they go out and they spend a day or they spend an hour, or they spend 10 minutes, like what does a typical installation look like for a small versus maybe a large restaurant? So give us a little context on that stage of things.
So small restaurants, I mean, usually a day. We constantly check up, like probably for almost the rest of the week. We'll go in there and they get shorter and shorter and shorter how long we actually have to spend time in there. But I try to do everything. Like our team does everything. I don't rely on Clover for much. Because I think that's what the client wants. That's what the client like. They no want those things. They want in-store customer service. I'm sure like you guys, like when I go and sell something, I think of it like, what if I was buying this product? What would I want to see?
Sure.
What makes me feel the most comfortable? So we spend a lot at large restaurants, small restaurants. We treat them all the same. But I tell people like, hey, we'll be here for a week, 2 weeks. My guy will come in here and, sit here, set up his computer. He can do other office stuff, but he'll be here if there's a situation that pops up that you need instant help with. And I would tell people, if you run your own agency, I would spend more money on support. Support separates you from everybody else. Like our clients stay with us for a long period of time because I feel like we answer the phone when they need us. Like, I mean, we have a running joke. One of our clients, a larger restaurant, they do about $1 million a month in credit card processing, a big restaurant. They have Clover in their situation. We spent a couple of weeks out there with them doing the installation setup and all that. Everybody in their management staff had to go to a certain wedding one day. They asked us to come in there and run their restaurant. My guy went in there, ran the restaurant for an entire day, did closeout, did everything for them. And we don't charge extra for that. Like, it's just the customer service. Like, we get to know their restaurant so well. So when a customer, if they do have something that they need to figure out, our people already know what's going on inside the restaurant. Mm-hmm. But typical setup, like we get it done in like a couple hours and then we just stay and hang out and fix things as they come along.
Right. And just kind of follow up with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So last question for you. a little bit off the wall, but just curious.
Yeah.
For those agents that are listening that maybe are selling Clover, they're thinking about selling Clover. What would be one tip if you had anything else maybe you didn't mention already, or maybe you did, but what's like one tip that really stands out to you that as you see other people that are selling Clover that you're like, that's a mistake. You should do this better, or something they can improve on. Anything come to mind?
Do your own installs. Do not just drop the box off. Like that is the worst thing
Yep.
you could do. I think that's one of the reasons why Clover got a bad reputation is
Yep.
owners didn't know what it could do. So they just set it up and they're like, oh, it doesn't do what I thought it was going to do.
All of a sudden
So-
you're on a level playing field with Square at that point.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
You know?
And again, I get not to go in, but Toast does the same thing.
Yeah.
Like that, like, it's funny. We have a running joke at our company, and I you guys can edit this out if you want to, but like we always walk up to a client and say, hey, what's the fastest way to get rid of a Toast rep? And they sit there and think about it. And then I'm like, you just got to sign up with them. Like you never see them again.
That's
So
I actually like that. That's really,
That's
that
a
can work
good
for,
one.
that can
Yes.
work in a variety of situations, not just
yeah,
Toast.
like you just
I
never
like
see
it.
them again. That's not
Right.
their thing. Like we
Right.
are customer service based kind of stuff. So I would tell
Yeah.
reps, do your own installs. A, it teaches you about the product. B, there's going to be, I don't care what technology you sell. And I tell everybody this, something's going to come up.
Yeah.
Like something's going to come up. It's not going to,
Right.
a client didn't know to ask if it does this.
Right.
You're going to have to figure out how to get it done. One of the first things was ever told to me when I started merchant services is your job is to fit a square peg in a round hole. That is your job. Figure out how to get out how to get it to work. So when you get out there, like play around with it. It's okay to make mistakes. Clients understand it. As long as you're the one handling it and they're not the ones handling it, they'll stay with you forever. So I would say get involved with your installs.
I love
Excellent
it. Well,
advice.
this has been so insightful, Josh. Before we
Yes.
sign off, just out of curiosity, I know you're out in the San Diego area. If any of our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, just the network or kind of find out more about what you do, anywhere that you would want to send them to learn more about you and your company?
Yes. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Josh Holden on LinkedIn. Instagram is at HTB Josh. And then also on Twitter is at HTB Josh. If you reach out to me there, I do a lot. Like I tell reps all over the place. Let me if you have questions, I feel like I've seen a lot. I stay very well connected. James, I watch your stuff all the time. I have friends in other high up in First Data. I have friends in Heartland. I have friends at all the different processors. So I ask a lot of questions. I stay really well connected. So if you ever have questions about how to overcome an ejection or anything like that, DM me. I love talking about this stuff all day.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you.
Josh, thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you guys. Thank you, Patti. Thank you, James.
So Patti, today, as we talk about our sponsor, ISOAMP, I want to talk about the API for just a minute.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I just had a call earlier today with the someone from a very, very large company that we've had on the podcast before, everybody would know them. And excuse me, they're one of our clients. They use our statement analysis service through ISOAMP. And this is a large company and we are their statement analysis department. They don't have one. And so they leverage our team for that. And that's a service that we provide. It's fully white labeled and all of that. But they reached out because they have Salesforce.
Okay.
And the question was, can we integrate with Salesforce?
Integrate, sure.
How do we do that? And, the short answer that I was able to give, which I really enjoyed, was you can do whatever you want. And the reason I can say that is because our API, we spent a huge amount of time on our API. Our API, honestly, is probably overkill for our solution. What I mean by that is you can remotely do anything that you want. We joke about the fact that if another company wanted to, they could literally build out our system using our own API to build it. Everything from editing pricing, choosing which proposal template that you want, choosing how you want the margin, even the margin control stuff, which is crazy.
Wow.
But let me talk about the two really simple ones that people tend to use our API for all the time. The first one is new lead created. So often for the salesperson, the first thing that happens in the sales process from a technology perspective is that they upload a statement to our system, right? Well, when that happens, if you're using Zoho or Salesforce or Iris or whatever, or HubSpot, you want to make sure that that triggers a new lead to be created in your system, right?
Sure.
That is trivial. So you can use our API to do that. You can use it through, you can set up a webhook through Zapier to do it with our system or whatever you want to do. But very trivial for any developer could set that up in your system, no matter what it is, to say, hey, when a new statement's uploaded to ISOAMP, create a lead, right?
Okay. Yeah.
The second one that's really common is once we finish the analysis, which I talked about last week, could be as short as a second if
Or
it's
as long
fully
as
automated.
maybe 30 seconds, but yeah.
30 seconds, or it could be 12 minutes. It could even be 5 hours later if you send us a nasty scan that somebody has to do all the data entry work on,
But
right?
it's going to be same day.
But it's going to be same day, and it's going to be completed accurately and correctly. But
Right.
whenever that might happen, we can trigger that to also then send a link to your system that would be a direct link
Ah.
into our system to look at that analysis. So think of it
Uh-huh.
like the agent uploads the statement that immediately creates a lead in your Salesforce instance. When
Right.
we get done, it triggers and notifies them through Salesforce, hey, this is done. They
Right.
see the link in Salesforce, they click the link, and that link's always there. So you can always use that as a reference point to go back to the proposal.
Sure.
They can edit things and all that. Two other really common ones that I'll mention that the API gets used for a lot. One is when the lead is already created in Salesforce or HubSpot or Iris, and they want to upload the file there rather than uploading it to our system.
Okay.
We have a very, very simple API to say, hey, if a document's uploaded with this particular tag or whatever, grab that and send that into our system and create a new analysis in our system automatically, right? So that kind of, that communication going that direction is really, really common.
Right.
Another one that people use that's really common is people go into our system and they'll edit a bunch of things on the pricing, and then they want to save the proposal, like the PDF proposal. They want to send that back as a file to their system.
Okay. Sure.
Right?
Right.
That we can do as well. So those are some of the really common API things. Now, again, if you say, well, I was wanting to do that, James, I was wanting to do X, Y, or Z, I can pretty much guarantee you,
Probably
you can do
can
X,
do
Y,
it.
or Z. It might take your developers 2 days to build X, Y, or Z, but our API, basically, if you can do it in our system, you can do it in your system. That's how we built our API. Our system really uses our own API to do most of what it does. So you can use our API to do pretty much anything you could think of from your system to ours. But again, the ones I mentioned today are just the most common. So if you want to learn more about that, head over to getisoamp.com. It's getisoamp.com, the leader in full service statement analysis. We'd love to give you a demo so you could learn more about it. So Patti, in questions from the field today, I'm going to touch on a very familiar topic, maybe one our audience is tired of hearing me talk about, but I'm going to keep talking about it anyway, and that's capital allocation. Always sounds a little bit boring when you say it, capital allocation. Just turns out to be like the most important thing in business. So,
of course.
the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because of our interview we just did with Josh Holden.
Okay.
And I thought about it so many times throughout the interview. And, one thing that always surprises me is that the companies who have resources right now, they don't seem to be wanting to invest those resources in the areas that make sense. It boggles my mind, Patti, the amount of money that companies are spending in this industry for acquisitions, right? So you give me a portfolio and, for instance, take a portfolio of, 100 Clover clients, right, that are active.
Okay.
And a processor would they would give you probably something like a 35x monthly on that, right? So, huge return on that. So 35 times the average monthly residual on that portfolio because it's all integrated payments. They know it's going to stick around for a while, right? Get a big processor that's got 1,000 Clovers and somebody acquires them, they're going to acquire them for a 60x. I mean, you're going to get big money for that.
Big money, right?
But the same company that would do that acquisition, if you came to them and said, here we have a Clover account that's going to generate $200 a month in margin. So you think you're willing to pay a 35x to acquire the account from a company that already has it, right? So you're willing to pay, what is that, $7,000 roughly?
Roughly.
Right? So you're willing to pay $7,000, think about that, $7,000 to buy that account from somebody else. But the agent needs you to cover $1,500 in equipment, and you need to hire a tech company for $800 to go out there and do the installation the way that Josh just described. And I seriously can count on one hand.
Yeah.
I can count on 3 fingers the number of companies I know that would say yes to that request.
I understand. We've talked about this before. It just boggles the mind.
It really does. It's just unbelievable. And so it's like, where is this disconnect? So let me tell you a couple of tips here that I think are very, very important. And I'm going to keep talking about it until I start to see some movement. And that is, if you are a large company with resources, okay, please understand that buying somebody else's book of business that you don't know is not the only way for you to use your capital. You can use your capital to buy accounts from the agents that you do know, meaning give them the resources that they need to close the account.
Right.
Right. And at the same ROI, like don't look at it any differently and say, well, I'm going to buy this account from somebody I don't know, who I don't trust, who I don't have the full understanding of their business, and I'm going to give them X multiple. Well, why
Right.
don't you go to your agents and offer the same multiple for them to help them close new accounts?
Right.
You can still limit your risk. You can still limit your liability with these deals. Be smart about it, but put the money where you're going to get accounts rather than it has to be this one-shot wonder with these bigger deals. So that's number one. If you're a smaller company, let me encourage you to stop looking at capital as a barrier to success. What I mean by that is a lot of small companies say, well, I don't have tens of thousands of dollars laying around, and my processor won't give me any money. And so I'm just stuck, and I'm just gonna have to sell equipment, and I'm the victim, and I can't compete with Toast and all of this.
Yeah. Victimization, right?
Yes. It's actually totally not true. Okay. So a couple of thoughts for you. Number one, get more creative about your upstream partnership. Go to your processor and say, look, I'll take the risk on these deals if you won't, right? I've already got $5,000 a month in residual income with you.
Right.
And I'm trying to close a deal where I need $6,000, $7,000. Okay. Spread it over 24 months, 36 months at 10% interest and take it out of my residuals. Give me a
Right.
loan against residuals. Go to your local bank and apply for an SBA 7A loan, right? You're
Sure.
positive cash flow.
Right.
You're growing. You're looking to hire people. Maybe you heard Josh and said, well, yeah, I'd love to have an installer as well. Okay. That's going to cost you $45,000 a year, $50,000 a year. If you're in San Diego, probably $80,000 a year, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah.
Go borrow the money from the SBA. The SBA loves to loan money to people so they can hire. That's what
course.
they love to do.
The
So,
whole reason they're out there.
right. You can go to your bank and they'll help you with all of this. And so there are plenty of sources of capital in this industry. The bottom line though is who's going to take the risk on it, who's taking the liability on it. And if you're willing to take the risk, you're going to get the reward. So don't bemoan the fact that, well, my ISO doesn't offer this or that or the other thing. Well, then why don't you offer it?
Right.
And understand that if you're willing to take the risk, odds are you can probably find somebody else who's willing to give you the money. And so get a little more creative. We're in a phase where, excuse me, I really think that one of the main things that's going to separate you from your competition over the next 5 years is going to be your allocation of capital. It's going to be how good are you at getting capital and putting it into your business in the ways that matter, that are going to truly differentiate. Because again, as Josh brought up, Toast is not doing this really effectively. Square is not doing this really effectively. And one of the problems is for a huge national company, same thing. I could say the same thing, by the way, from almost all of the big companies in our industry as well.
Sure.
All the big ISOs. They're not doing this. And the thing is, it's very hard when you're a national company to cover the entire country with this really custom personalized service experience.
Right.
You as a local ISO, a local agent, you can provide that. And that's something you can do that the big ones can't do. So listen to what Josh just said and understand that you can implement that yourself in your own market. It's just going to take you becoming a little bit more of a business person, not just a salesperson. Get access to capital and use that capital to your advantage to go out and get accounts and to provide customers, merchants with that experience that they really want.
Yeah, that's really good advice, James, because it's all about, proper use of capital. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people and no offense to anybody who's listening, but a lot of the people who listen are salespeople, and that's great. And they're great at sales. Just need to add to your skill set and, get a little more business acumen. Thank you,
And
James.
again, it's like if you realize that's not your thing, and you're like, wow, I just can't do that. Well, then you're going to have to find an ISO that does that for you. Right. So you got to know what your options are, but yeah, hopefully that'll help somebody out there today, Patti.
Well, James, a new study from the fraud prevention firm SIEM foresees escalating attacks against individuals and companies, largely driven by AI and advanced automated technologies. Wow. Now, I wanted to bring this up this week. This report just came out. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is I'm going to admit to everybody out there that I got scammed myself last year for, what was pretty good piece of money, a couple months mortgages. And, I kicked myself because I should be smarter than this, right? But am I smarter than AI? I mean, so, and I think this is interesting, in our case, in the case of merchant services, the report notes additionally that the current obsession with frictionless commerce has lowered barriers to entry for fraudsters, especially across mobile apps and e-commerce sites.
Yeah.
And of course, even worse than that is that fraudsters are claiming bigger paydays. Average tickets rose by about 300% between September and December 2022.
Wow.
The company said transaction declines increased by nearly 11% during the same period. Now, the survey also pointed to a new trend called, which just blows my mind, fraud as a service. We have software as a service. We have banking as a service. Now we have fraud as a service.
This I have to hear about. Okay.
Okay. Makes fraud even more accessible, and thus, especially frauds that are into getting money out of the system, right? As happened to me, getting my money, or getting money out of a bank or whatever. And the reasons range from economic hardship to the ease of access to sophisticated tools. And they actually have tutorials for novice fraudsters.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Isn't it? And yeah, to me, this report is especially noteworthy because it comes on the heels of a joint statement from federal financial institution regulators came out at the beginning of this year, warning of the risks associated with crypto assets, including scams and other frauds. Regulators said they have, quote, significant safety and soundness concerns. And whenever bank regulators use safety and soundness, they mean business. With business models that are concentrated in crypto asset related activities or have concentrated exposures to the crypto asset sector. Crypto, of course, has fallen from a peak of about market value of about 3 trillion in late 2021 to about $1 trillion these days. Anyway, none of this I don't think is gonna, have a major impact on slowing the adoption of crypto at the point of sale because that adoption's been slow anyway.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Would you agree? But I really think it's noteworthy to really keep an eye out for fraud, to do whatever you can to prevent yourself and your clients from getting hit because it's getting worse out there. And I do agree that with the increase in automated technologies and AI, it's helping us. It's helping them too.
Yeah. Good stuff, Patti. Thanks so much for sharing that.